In this episode, Marc has Jack recount the time he unwittingly took part in a bank robbery.
So, Jack, you know quite a bit about public service announcements.
Oh, yes. Well, I've taken quite an interest in them because ever since the day it saved my life. I mean, I thought, what am I going to do? My house has been repossessed. My investment portfolio of Lotto Max tickets produced no results. And I thought, somebody's got to know about this. So I had a public service announcement and I said, I need help.
That's not a public service announcement. That's a Jack service announcement.
Yeah, well, it could be interpreted like that. But I was standing on a street corner with my power tools. I mean, that was a subtle suggestion, like, I need help, but do you need help?
We'll do renovations for food.
I became gainfully employed.
Yeah, what was your first contact in this public service announcement?
Well, this dark van pulled up to the street and said, listen, I need some renovations. And I said, I'm your man. And so I went in the back of the truck and there was these 5 guys from Ukraine. Oh, I thought these guys were great. I said, so what's your name? One guy said, I'm number 1. And then the other guy said, I'm Brutus Beethoven.
Wasn't there a color in one of their names?
And then the other one's, I'm Green Mozart. And the other guy said, I'm Hickleberry Blue.
Wasn't there Odyssey the Fantastic? Wasn't he one of them?
Oh, yeah, he wore a cape. Yeah, he took it quite seriously. And of course, they all had masks on.
Just because they were a little bit shy, I imagine.
Yeah, I asked them about that. They said they called themselves the Modest 5. And they said, we're going to go fix the safe.
When they did this, did they use air quotes around the word fix?
They did, yeah. And then they put their finger to their mouth like, shh, be quiet. Within 20 minutes, they brought us to the Royal Bank of Canada. It was closed, but they said, listen, the safe is broken and we got to fix it. That's our job.
What time of day was it?
1 a.m.
Okay.
Yeah, well, they don't go and do it during business hours, of course.
You can't fix safes during business hours. That just makes common sense.
It does make common sense.
How'd you get in the building?
Well, Green Mozart and Hickleberry Blue dragged in this huge toolbox, brought it right up to the bank vault, and then removed a bank manager who knew the combination. That's when I said, I think this is all just a ruse. Then Odyssey the Fantastic said that I would have to have my power tools removed from my colon if I didn't shut up. That's when number 1 showed up and he said, we're just removing these bags because they're in the wrong spot.
So they were taking them to the right spot.
Yeah, and then Brutus Beethoven said, just wait here, we're off to get sandwiches.
I knew that right from the start.
Yeah, well, I did realize I was the fall guy. I mean, I was the only guy not wearing a mask. I spent the next 5 months in a prison laundromat meditating on the meaning of starch.
In a literal sense, as well as a figurative sense.
That's right, yeah.
We have concluded our broadcast schedule for today.
No, we have not completed our broadcast schedule for today. That was part 1 of Public Service Announcements, a contemporary art form. Part 2, the unabridged history of public service announcements, is coming up. I will issue a warning. There is some offensive language. However, I have made appropriate substitutions. For example, if someone says, hey, F word, you will hear, hey, F word, you.
In this episode, Jack and Marc, self-educated scholars, discuss the little-known facts about the ancient history of public service announcements.
Now, who invented the concept of public service announcements? And what was the first public service announcement?
Oh, well, that goes way back. They've seen public service announcements scrawled on cave walls, warning about pointed sticks that were being flung in a certain area and you should stay out of that area, that it was dangerous to go there.
Oh, wasn't there one public service announcement that said, careful, you'll put someone's eye with that stick?
Oh, yeah, well, that was on a cave wall as well. In pictures, of course. That's where the saying comes from, better than a poke in the eye with a sharp stick.
Wasn't there a guy, he was being chased by a saber-toothed tiger, and he managed to grab one of the saber-toothed tiger's saber teeth. He was hurt a bit, but then his friend said, hey, better than a poke in the eye with a sharp stick.
Yes, and that was repeated many times by other members in the tribe until it evolved into a public service announcement. And this announcement was often repeated whenever some disaster happened, like locusts or woolly mammoths charging through your campsite. You'd kind of just lean back, throw your hands in the air, and say it's better than, what do you call it, a sharp stick with a poke in your eye.
They stuttered a lot, these guys. You gave the specific quote. It's better than, what do you call a sharp stick with a poke in your eye. That was the actual quote.
Oh, yes, of course. Well, language was new amongst peoples in those days. Aside from grunts and so forth, you did as best as you could with the words you had. And sometimes you'd say a word that no one knew, like the word In fact, the first time was uttered from one tribe to another, which both tribes spoke different languages, the one tribe thought that meant the flat ass of a mastodon. It was an insult, but the guy who had said to the other member of the other tribe, he didn't know it was an insult.
And that became pretty dangerous because that's a word people often use when they're at a loss for words.
I know.
And the other guy will think, oh, he says I'm as ugly as a flat-ass mastodon.
Yeah, I know.
Right.
That's why there were so many wars. When Neanderthals met the Homo sapiens for the first time, they had some meetings over territory and stuff.
Right.
And then there was the great Neanderthal orator.
Armo Lalabra, wasn't it?
Well, it's hard to translate, It's Armo the lab rat.
Armo the lab rat, yeah. Because they used to do experiments on Armo.
Yeah. They did, just for fun.
No. They were actually doing research on effects of certain things. That's why they called him Armo the lab rat.
One of the first labs that were ever set up in the ancient times. Like, how many rocks can you get Armo the lab rat to carry before he collapses?
They'd have him carry some rocks, and then they would find that after 15 rocks, he could carry no more.
That's right. And they settled on about 15 rocks, I think. Above that, it wasn't good for your health. So then they had a public service announcement. They'd go around and they'd tell people, don't carry more than 15 rocks. It's just not worth it. It's going to blow out your kneecaps. Arnold, he decided that this is a great thing we've discovered. I should go tell our friends, the Homo sapiens. And he went over, and of course, they're kind of not really on great terms anyways, but Arnold went over and said, I want to tell you something. Lo and behold, these Homo sapiens, they thought means you've got the flat ass of a fat woman. Well, what the hell does that mean? It was kind of like a mastodon joke. They had asses again in it, a flat ass of a fat woman. So Homo sapiens, they got pretty angry.
I mean, if someone says, hey, you got the fat ass of a flat woman.
No, it's a flat ass of a fat woman. Why is that even an insult? I mean, it could be attractive to someone, the flat ass of a fat woman. I mean, this is when you're all prehistoric human beings still.
Well, back then, fat asses were quite attractive.
I would think so. That means you're well fed. If you're well fed, that's good.
If you rank all the different hominids according to how fat their asses were, first you had the Cro-Magnons. They didn't really have an ass.
No.
So they couldn't hold up their pants. Their pants were always falling down.
Yeah, and they couldn't run away. That's why they went extinct. You can imagine getting chased by a saber-tooth and your pants are falling down.
And then you're trying to run with your pants around your ankles, so your steps are very short.
It's no problem for a saber-tooth to catch up and just make dinner out of you. They never figured out this either. That was because Cro-Magnons went extinct because they just simply didn't listen to the public service announcement about belts. There was a public service announcement about belts. They didn't have a belt. It was a strip of rawhide from an animal skin. It said, don't be this person. Look at the Cro-Magnons. They can't run away. Their pants fall down. They get devoured. So always wear a belt and safety and don't carry more than 15 rocks. That was one of the first public service announcements.
Oh, okay. It was one public service announcement for both the rocks and the pants.
Yeah, they combined with both because they realized they were onto a good thing. Because public service announcement, it's not like they had proper communication. They didn't even have smoke signals. You had to walk over to the other person and say it. Tell one person, you tell another person. And yeah, of course, those public service announcements of those days got changed a bit. That first one that I just talked about, the 15 rocks in the belt, well, like 3 months later, it said, don't run with the herds that are being chased by saber-tooths because you'll probably get trampled. It didn't have anything to do with what it started with.
And they always said, well, that's a stupid public announcement. Who's going to do that anyways?
Exactly.
So they ignored it. And it's like science today, right? People ignore what scientists tell us. Right? They tell us about global warming. They tell us about COVID-19. And that just really gave rise to conspiracy theories.
Oh, yeah. It's exactly the same thing. There was lots of conspiracy theories in ancient times.
There was one conspiracy theory that said rocks don't really hurt you if they hit you.
Oh, yeah. They used to spread that conspiracy theory before the Cro-Magnons decided to attack the Neanderthals by throwing rocks.
Right, because they were hoping the Neanderthals would just say, here's some rocks coming. Don't believe all this rocks hurt you when they hit you, bull crap.
Yeah, just don't carry more than 15.
That's the only thing they thought. Wasn't there a time where this giant boulder came rolling down a hill and it destroyed the town, and they were trying to figure out how it got there?
Oh, yes. That was also found on an old cave wall. That was the incident of the large rock
F-word.
That was one of the first times
F-word
was used, but it just meant rancid meat.
It didn't mean what it meant today.
No, today it means many things, of course, but this goes to show you how versatile one word can have many meanings, and certainly in those days when words were newly invented. I mean, each tribe had only maybe 25 words.
One of the problems with a small number of words is you didn't have too many words that rhyme, so they couldn't come up with any good limericks.
That's right, yeah. They had a real bad shortage on limericks. I think it made them despondent a lot of the time.
With the 25 words or so that they had, if you add up all the syllables, they could make a few haiku poems. But they didn't use that silly 575 syllable restriction, I don't think, in their haiku.
No, their haiku was to just try and show off and use as many of the 25 words that everyone knew.
So you had the Cro-Magnons with the basically no asses that couldn't hold up their pants.
Yeah.
And then you had the Peking man. Those asses were a little bit bigger.
Yeah, there was a few of them. They were starting to make an appearance. They were traveling salesmen of the day.
And they sold belts.
They did sell belts, but the Cro-Magnons, for some reason, they thought the belt was bad luck. Why, I don't know. But they couldn't understand the concept of something being able to hold up a pair of pants. You know what the real big problem was? They didn't invent belt loops.
So the pants would just slide under.
They didn't have the number 0. They didn't have anything that was a circle in their culture.
Yeah, well, the 0 wasn't invented until thousands of years later. So they couldn't have anything that was a closed loop.
No, it wasn't in their imagination. It wasn't in their ability to even conceive of such a thing.
They had the number 1. And if you take a belt and stretch it out, what do you get?
You get the number 1.
So belts were quite common, but they just couldn't sell any.
The Cro-Magnons did adopt the belt to a degree, but they would just carry it around in their hand.
So that's why it didn't work.
Exactly.
I mean, it wasn't until tens of thousands of years later, they would find buried Cro-Magnon and Peking and Homo sapiens and all these hominids. They'd find them and they'd find belts beside them that were unused and their pants down around their knees.
Well, the thing is that the Neanderthals and the Homo sapiens, they just said
F-word.
And they didn't wear pants.
Right. Well, that was the big solution.
That was a big solution, and it was a big breakthrough. And then that was another public announcement, was stop wearing those
F-wording
pants.
Well, how'd that thing get translated over 3 months? How did that change?
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, it started off with quite a sensible idea of don't wear those
F-wording
pants, and then it evolved into...
Okay, you know how F-wording means rancid mammoth meat?
Yeah.
They kind of interpreted that to be somehow make sure you're F-wording mammoths.
That's right. That's what it was. Oh, I almost forgot. That was a rather tragic translation. You imagine someone, they say, well, he's running around with no pants on. He's got that part. But now he thinks he has to go try and F-word mammoth because that's going to bring good luck to the tribe. That always ended in tragedy.
Yeah, well, they were never sure what position to use.
Most of the time, the mammoth just sat down. And this actually caused the days of great celebration because it was quite an honorable way to go. They thought it was a sign of respect from the woolly mammoth, who their lives depended on.
When it would just sit down?
Yeah, the woolly mammoth would just sit down, and because it felt something going on back there. And then it would sit down and then just rub its ass back and forth until it didn't feel any emotions back there anymore.
So you have the Peking, the Cro-Magnon. What about the Neanderthals? Which ones were the fat ass ones?
Well, the Neanderthals said that the Homo sapiens had the flat ass, fat ass. Fat ass was flat. That's an insult. It's trying to say you're lazy and you're always sitting on it.
If you're always sitting on your ass, it'll tend to flatten out, won't it?
That's what it means.
Now, they had a lot of scientists back then, as we talked about. Which ones were the ones that came up with the concept of science? Was that the Neanderthals?
Yeah, the Neanderthals, they were the grand scientists. And it's not known because almost everything they invented, they took credit, the Homo sapiens, because the Neanderthals didn't survive. So it was easy. There's no one around to say, hey, that was our idea about using logs for...
Oh, for wheels.
for wheels. But they never got the idea of cutting the log into nice discs.
Well, I heard that first they didn't cut the branches off the trees. So they would try to roll it, but it wouldn't go very far. And then they figured out, oh yeah, we've got to cut the branches off the trees. But for a while, they weren't rolling it along the axis of the tree, right? They try to roll it like end over end.
Oh, yes. That was quite hilarious when you see that on the cave drawings, pushing a log. And that got passed down unwittingly to Scotsmen. They throw the big pole.
Yeah, caber tossing.
Caber tossing. The Neanderthals invented caber tossing.
What about underwater? Didn't they do any experiments on Armo the lab rat? Didn't they hold him underwater to see how long it would be until he would die?
Oh, yeah. Well, there was that. But that made Arnold the lab rat quite pissed off. And he was a big guy. And so that would only last so long until he started wringing a few necks. And that became another public service announcement. Don't hold Arnold the lab rat underwater very long. He'll probably snap your neck.
How did that evolve over a few months?
Oh, that involved into come over to Lab Rat's cave at high sun. He's serving livers.
Well, they all showed up, right?
And they all showed up, and he got pretty angry again. He had a tough life. He was a big guy. It's good he was a big guy because people only pushed him so far, and then he started throwing rocks and logs, and he could never find a pair of pants that fit anyways because he was almost like the Incredible Hulk. I think the Incredible Hulk is based on Arnold Lab Rat. He was huge.
After a while, when they discovered that these PSAs were evolving and losing their meaning, they came up with another technique to deliver PSAs, didn't they?
Well, during times of war, if you wanted to get a message, they didn't have passenger pigeons, and they invented one of the first catapults. They would just pull a tree back and put a guy who was yelling, and they would catapult him over the troops, and then he would yell his announcement. And they'd say, look, here comes a public service announcement, because they could see the guy flying through the air like a projectile. But they always ran out of, it wasn't a popular job. Usually it ended in tragedy as long as you got your message out, though. But
they would also communicate with allies back and forth that way. They put the guy in the thing, he'd catapult over, he'd deliver the announcement, he'd land in the allies' territory, and they would respond with another message. That would go back and forth. I mean, there were some days when these guys were just shooting back and forth across the sky.
Oh, I know. And the legend of heavy head hernia.
His head was heavy, so when he was flinging, his head would be the lead part.
They decided, well, look at people with big heads are the best public service announcement catapulters. Then they decided, why not just attach a few rocks to this guy's head and shoot those forward? That didn't work too well because usually it pulled the guy's head off. And then they had public service announcements about that.
Now, the idea of going up a hill to deliver a public announcement, one of the problems with that was it took the guy so long to get to the top of the hill that the message was no longer current.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that was always a big problem. When there was a stampede of wildebeest coming towards your campsite, and then he would go up the hill and say, wildebeest, get out of the way. And by the time he got there, the whole camp is trampled already. He'd be way too late.
They beat him up for not giving him the message.
Yeah, they blame him. But it was tough being a public service announcer. Very unforgiving job. It was like, that's where the old don't shoot the messenger, well, it used to be don't shoot the public service announcer.
We have concluded our broadcast schedule for today. Good night.
all over. Just the way that you say goodnight to me brings that feeling on inside of me. Quivers down the backbone, I've got the shivers down the thigh bone. Yeah, the tremors in my backbone, shaking all over. Quivers down the backbone, yeah, the shakes in the knee bone. I got the tremors in the thigh bone, shaking all over. Well, you make me shake it and I like it, baby. Well, you make me shake it and I like it.
Man, he was the bouncer at the Pallady dance. He slashed round his face, I've given half a chance. He sew you back to pieces, all for less than half a quid. He thought he was the meanest until he met with Savage Sid. Nah, Sid, he was a greaser with some nasty boots. He pulled a pint of Guinness over Benny's boots. Benny looked at Sydney, Sydney's head was back in his eye. Sydney chose a switchblade and Benny got a cold meat pie. Oh, what a terrible sight. Much to the people's delight. What hell of a fight! Sydney grabbed an hatchet, buried it in Benny's head. The people gasped as he bled. The end of a day, well, they dragged him from the wreckage of the paying bits. They tried to stick together all the bits that would fit, but some of him was missing. The part of him arrived too late. So now he works for Jesus as the pastor at St. Peter's Gate.
ELP and Benny the Bouncer, and don't forget to check out the Jack and Mark Show, available on iTunes. Thank you.